Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. My involvement in this began some 6 years ago. I'm from New Hampshire. I now live here because I've been working on this bill so hard. I was representing a company called Amberwave, which had 24 or 5 people running around in bunny suits doing material science and inventing things that hadn't been invented before. They were a spin-out, a startup out of MIT, a very typical story in a state like New Hampshire. The University of New Hampshire has opposed this bill from the start and still does, and so has the Economic Development Department of New Hampshire, and for the same reasons. In any case, a 5-year debate took place that I had trouble following. Being new to the patent situation, as I'm sure many of you are, I found it somewhat confusing to work my way through the impact of post-grant review and estoppel connected with that and all of these other issues. And I therefore specialized in what I came to talk about, which was early stage innovation, startups, universities. And it was clear that we had problems, but it wasn't clear to Congress that we had problems because with all of the fights between pharma and multinationals and the IT megatech companies, licensors, and all of the big boys who had a lot of clout and a lot of power and a lot of resources, we were not heard. The startups simply were not heard, and that's reflected in this bill. And that's important, because if they're not reflected in the bill, if their needs are not taken care of, as you've heard already, we had a serious problem. So I had to learn a lot fast, and I have learned, and I've learned to the point where when anyone asks me what I do around my wife and children, they leave the room, because patents is kind of arcane and boring when you keep hearing about it. But I was able to explain it to my kids this way. Here's how it works. In America, if you combine A and B into a third thing called C, and it's useful to accomplishing D, you can get a patent. Now what universities do is they work on the A and B part. They work on the research. And they work on it assiduously, and they work on it more than anyone else. That's their role in life. It's part of their public mission to train their students, to train their professors, and to support the research function within the university through something called tech transfer. Now, tech transfer means that the patent subject matter that is acquired by the university and or the professor or some combination thereof is moved out into the public. After all, if the US is paying for all this stuff, it's no good unless it gets to the public where it can be used and where it can benefit the public. So there's an encouragement to do just that. So we're all familiar with the stereotype, the eureka, I just thought of something, and we think that you run off and you get money and then you get a patent and then you manufacture it. Well, that's not the way it works in most cases. There's an idea. You can't just patent an idea. You have to create an invention, and then that invention, to get to innovation where it's adopted so that it does benefit the public, can take years. But most of that starts with US funding from the United States. And most of the movement through A, B, C, and D has to be funded by somebody, and it's usually not the university, and it's usually not the researcher. C and D parts of that 4-part piece is generally private funding. And sometimes it's the states, which I'm going to get back to, but it's very important. So we have this funding come from the federal government. It's been flat over the last 10 years, probably shrink a little bit in the future, which may indicate why the universities are split on this issue. In any case, that research needs to be organized, it needs to be managed, it needs to be coordinated with other research, it needs to be funded, and sometimes it needs to be augmented with applied research or translational research. That's all the job of the tech transfer department in the university. They service the researchers, they service the research department, they help make it go, they help it get monetized in case it's going to be used for commercialization. Now sometimes it's going to be used just for research. Nobody knows what it means, but here's a new discovery. That's okay. But when it needs to be monetized to produce technology that can bring a return to the government and bring on the benefits to the people and a return to the university on the licensing, then that has to be managed very carefully. You can sell it, you can license it, you can start a new company. If you license it to a big company, it helps to have the option of being able to do it on your own. Clearly, if you only have one choice, bargaining changes and the value goes down and the cost of the license goes down. So the problem, as alluded to by others this morning, is that when you're a startup, unlike a large company, you have to share your knowledge with somebody. Now, the key to getting a patent, and I didn't mention this earlier, but now you're ready to hear it, is it has to be something new. It has to be novel. And if you share it with somebody that you can't completely trust and they don't have a contract and they're not part of a big company, then they could go in and file. And they could go in and claim that they did it. And that's problem number one with the first to file regime. If they beat you there, then you've lost and you can't get a patent. But the other problem is that in fact, if you've made it public, it isn't novel anymore. And that is a real problem. Here in America, we came up with an answer. It's called the grace period. This is a safe harbor period. Two kinds. The first kind is you can study and work on innovation and some new invention, the A and B and C part of it, for years and years. As long as you don't tell anybody about it, you can prove that you were doing it. If somebody comes in and files, beats you to the patent office on that work, you can bring your own files, your own records, and you can show that you were the first true inventor. Part of tech transfer's job in a university is to make certain that those records are saved, and for that reason. The second is the minute you do share it, obviously it's become public, you have 1 year following that to file for your patent. So when you talk to angel capitalists, when you talk to seed capitalists, when you talk to collaborators, when you talk to applied research advisors, manager advisors, all the pieces that you need to make something work, you're protected because you have a year to go and file. That's changed in this bill, and it's changed drastically, and I'll explain that in a minute. Now, I suppose that if startups had started all this legislation, which they couldn't because they're too busy back in their labs working, we'd be talking about pirates, patent piracy. We wouldn't be talking about trolls. Captain Hook or Captain Kidd or whoever is a pirate would be on the cover of all the tech magazines and not trolls. Trolls was a very interesting device invented by PR people who wanted to create a villain, somebody you could get mad at, and therefore we should pass this bill. Well, the problem with that is that every plaintiff is a troll. And universities who don't make things, and research labs who don't make things, are trolls. So the troll definition in the bill doesn't mean much. It really affects everybody who has a patent. And what's going on in the bill is that the large corporations are saying, hey, we can get sued for damages here. We can't be certain that we're not going to get sued. We can't be certain about what the cost of the infringement is going to be in terms of damages. Therefore, we'd like to reduce all that. We'd like to reduce our uncertainty. The problem is they shift it to the front end. Because when they stand up here, as they did last week, and some of you may have heard it, and said, gee, our corporate finance people won't invest in something unless there's more certainty. Well, just imagine the effect of that on a little startup inventor who's trying to raise funding from a venture capitalist or from an angel capitalist. I mean, that cuts both ways. They've simply shifted it to the front end. And the impact of that is serious because it cuts out the startup option. And if universities lose the startup option, they lose the ability to recoup the investment they've made and to support their own funding needs. This transfer of uncertainty raises university costs. It raises university risk with respect to how many tech transfer items they can have in their portfolio. They're a little like venture capitalists. And it deters investment. So why is that not a good idea? Well, just think in economic policy terms. This is what economists would call an uncertainty that it's an externality. It's a problem. It's a friction in the system. But who's better able to bear it? Well, it seems to me that these companies, and you know who they are, there's a long list of the most successful companies in the country, in the world, they're doing okay. Startups are not doing okay. Startups are in trouble. If this bill passes, they won't be able to carry that externality. They won't be able to get done what they need to get done. So it's important that we care about this, not for all the reasons you've heard about jobs, but because our economy needs this creative destruction, this new refreshment of its technology, that needs to happen. There's a bargain with patents. When you get a patent, you also surrender the technology. It gets publicized. And that's good because people can invent around it, they can use it, they can take your C and turn it into their B and create a new C out of it. That's what moves things forward. And that's good. And you are protected in the process. When Bill Gates was asked, what keeps you awake at night? He said, what keeps me awake at night is two guys in a garage somewhere. I don't want to be disrupted. I don't want to be dislodged from my markets by something I haven't thought of and they have. So it's not altogether bad for them to eliminate startups, to eliminate this option, or to get enough control over it so they're the only outlet within universities. Now, universities themselves have incumbency. Stanford, they're for the bill. Well, why not? They're in Silicon Valley, they've got venture capitalists, they've got a whole innovation infrastructure surrounding them. Chapel Hill, Research Triangle, 128, and all of that in New England supporting Yale. And on and on. Austin built their own infrastructure years ago, and it's now working. Other states want to do this. Other states like Ohio, like Alabama, like Mississippi. Remember I said there's flat funding, and it may go down. The incumbent universities look at the up-and-comers and consider that they're going to be competing with these people for federal grants, for federal research grants. They've got to take a dim view of that. So they'd rather take a hit with this, whatever that means, because they can withstand the hit knowing, like chemotherapy, that the other ones will not survive it. And that is important to them. So until everyone is included, until all universities benefit from this, until all startups can function, this bill is incomplete. It isn't fixed. We're just getting heard now, but it's time that we were heeded, because if we're not, as you've already heard, there'll be uncertainty resulting from the constitutional questions and uncertainty in investment in early stage innovation, and that will be poisonous to our secret sauce here in America, which is that we innovate better than anybody else. Thank you.